Forming in 1988 and based in Bristol, this triple outfit has 5 albums to name, with Blue Lines being the first on their list, consisting of Grant Daddy G. Marshall, formerly Andy Mushroom Valves, and Robert 3D Down Nadja, who was suspected of being the mysterious faceless artist Banksy, have come together along with special guests Tricky, Horace, Tony, Shara, Nina, and a bunch of others who I don't have the breath to say in Massive Attack! The creative choices on this album, production-wise, were great. They're not overused. They're intricate. They do way more than just the cringy record scratch. He's doing some cooler stuff with it than usual. And also it's drowned in reverb, and I think it's a spring reverb because it's got a lot of low end to it, and it's really pushing itself back and forward.
In the drums of that first track, there's all these subtle applications of reverb on certain snares, and I think given the sort of linear structure of the track, it's very subtle, intricate. I think little additions like that keep the interest. Weirdly enough, I think the first track is actually a good tone setter for the album to come. It sort of seems to sum up all the elements, be them personal gripes or things I enjoy about the album. It seems to have all of them in there.
Among the oscillating effects in this album, there are delays, filter work, and they're the main two that I think they play with most. You've got more simple delays, like on the kick drum in the third song that's jazzy? The more jazzier? Yeah, that one. When they all stop for a second at the start and you've got the kick drum delaying.
There's 2 instances of delay on it. It's delaying a delay. So you have the delay that's going, it's applying those 16th notes, and then you've got the delay on the outside that's putting it in.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess you could argue it even ties some of the dub reggae elements and production approaches together between tracks as well. Like the use of scratches on Unfinished Sympathy, with just how drowned out and reverb they are.
Their sound design's great.
Yeah, it's actually contributing nicely to this sort of, I want to say sinister. It's kind of a surreal quality with it, with how between pitch the scratching actually is. It's just going all over the place. And the reverb really captures that and enhances it and adds it to the rest of an already pretty eerie mix, especially with that sort of melody.
If I go on to that, I find it hard to comprehend how people use samples in a way that's actually coherent from all of these different songs.
They don't always do it on the album, but generally.
Yeah, like that is playing a major 7th when the whole of the rest of the song, the string arrangement and everything else, is in a minor key. And it's just adding this nice dissonance to it, this eerie nature to it. Also, it lands on the minor 6th, which I guess if they're playing the D underneath the actual root note, it's an augmented 5th. Didn't sound resolved, did it?
Fucking right. I think the most welcoming thing of the track tends to be the string sections, like this. Either sampled strings or synth strings, whatever it is, it's held up well to today.
So fucking thick.
Yeah, till today's standards. Just the way Shara Nelson's vocals actually managed to get really well complemented by the harmony taking place.
Yeah.
With to every lyrical T, where she's talking about being in Mad in Love before, and the first chord sustained by the strings is actually the brightest in the chord sequence, and just the more she sort of brings up the turmoil changes in whatever relationships she's talking about, the strings match that, just it's almost like it's soundtracking her really closely and precisely.
I love the flow of that song and the way that she rises, it's just her vocal rising to the pinnacle from the melody that she's going through, but then you've got the strings that all come in and do an extra push after, which really solidified the song and its feel and meaning.
I think the most glaring clash that sample elements and scratches is on the second track, which is undoubtedly my least favourite track in the whole track list. It's the most unevolving.
I think they do the least that I enjoyed with the samples in there as well, like that guitar sample, which sounds detuned. I don't know if it goes back up. I think it does slide back up to pitch as the chords are playing. It's like it's on the record and it's been slowed down and they were speeding it back up as the chord comes in. One thing I did like about it was the snare. They had, every time the snare hit, there was like that little vinyl crackle after. Also, it sounded like a tail of the snare drum. Really makes the samples coherent.
Also makes the drums more listenable that they applied a sampled snare over the like more digital kit like sequence electronic drums on there, which I think just sound kind of like hollow, and the reverb that's applied onto them isn't necessarily flattering. So it makes that a bit more palatable. I think it's a better instance of the group like merging electronic drums with sampled ones. The brass itself though is like the main glaring issue.
It's dissonant. It completely changes the feel of the song to make it feel like there's something menacing about it. And I can't see what in those lyrics is menacing.
The whole subject matter is standpoints on, like, I guess, one night stands and like being a stud and just like not going after multiple women, having like, he prefers one love.
The dots just don't connect at all.
And I think it gets actually worse towards, well, on the very last passage of the song where you have this like very somber sampled piano playing and then just fucking Jaws is coming. It's rhythmically in time, but just like thematically and harmonically it's there. It's just, it sounds too abrasive for the rest of the song it sits in, which ends up being like one of the smoothest and most linear and drab. Horace, I think it's his most unflattering vocal performance on the album as well, and I think that's just to do with how long he's riding on the track with so little progression in between, like, I want to say verses, but can you find them? Despite it not being an original composition from the group, lyrically at least, it still manages to contribute nicely to the sort of self-betterment, wisdom, lyrical themes, like with Horace Andy at the very end, on the very last track, sort of talking about the world in a greater sense, and like your place in it. But I think where the lyrics tend to be more dated and undeniably cringeworthy, they just kind of come in a cluster on the track that has one of my favourite instrumentals on the album, Daydreaming.
We were wrong. It's 5-man army we're talking about. We will improve. I'm sorry. Hey guys, and welcome to Cringy Times Makes Flaccid Lines, the show where we put your favourite abominable lyrics in a list. In third place, we get 2 for the price of 1. Where stuttering may have been cool in the 90s, it's not now. In a close second is a fetish, maybe best kept in the bedroom. First place comes in with a real bang. Alfie. 1 word.
Esplosione.
That's all for this week. Leave your favourite flaccid lyrics down in the comments below. Thanks for playing. After all of those lyrics, that one that I was saying to you earlier, I like the beat to go and make a coffee.
Whoa!
I can't rap unless I'm completely awake all the time.
Something that holds us back from loving this, and especially me, and I'm a bigger fan of Massive Attack than Rowan, is that it hasn't really stood the test of time like completely. Offers a lot of great ideas still, but
it's aged really poorly.
Not really poorly, more in a production aspect and just sonically,
lyrically as well. I think I like the metaphors of concrete jungle and stuff like that, even though those terms have been used a lot before.
Where? That could always be a sign of influence and reference.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it is
which
clear.
I don't doubt. I think where the influence of the specials is applied is more in the subject matters and lightly in some of the like instrumentation, just from like a track like 5 Man Army. That's something I like about this album, is how despite the group going in like a few different lanes of influences, like from funk music,
Reggae,
jazz rap,
ambient,
gospel even, but still they manage to keep things sonically coherent, and they don't forget to like include the trip hop elements to just sort of round the listening experience out. Another like point of influence would probably be A Tribe Called Quest, again out of positive messages and the jazz rap influence that's more prevalent on a song like where they're sort of riding this smoother jazz rap instrumental. It's got like some light funk elements towards the later verses. There's some slap bass included. It's like a nice addition.
You get the variation between the standard just finger plucked bass and the slap bass, just giving it way more energy. There's just loads of little variation points in that song. Like you've got a snare which is, it does like a fill into itself. There was a really nice piano sample in 5 Man Army that slightly dissonant. I think it just makes it sound slightly eerie, adding to the whole nature of the track. One time, this was the really cool part about it, it ends and they play a major chord after it, I think with their own piano, unless that was part of the sample. So they play that dissonant melody and you think it's going to end on the minor again, and it goes to a major chord. Yay.
All the like inclusions of effects on that track as well, I think, are another sort of pinpoint for this album being more sonically ahead of the curve with the fold of trip hop, with the elements and influences they pull from being so varied and diversified, but like this sort of dub reggae angle they take seems to really suit like both the MCs and Horace. Talking about this album being more forward thinking and I guess sort of a big influencing point for trip hop down the road, people like Portishead as one example. There's like that bass line on the first track which is very constant, just it sort of makes me think of how Radiohead would approach some of their like bass lines on Kid A, like that is it the national anthem as well, where you just have like a constant steady drum groove, recorded but sequenced all the same, and then the bass line is constant as well. Yeah, I could see that being like a point of influence for a band like Radiohead down the road. And Massive Attack and Radiohead, I'm pretty sure have worked together.
Have they?
Yeah. Despite the rapping being a bit like clumsy and dated in places, there's an undeniable sense of chemistry between these three MCs. The way they sort of like finish each other's punchlines and just contribute to like the middle of rap verses. That, you know, they're a very like, even from this early stage, they're quite a solid unit together.
Yeah.
They do like bounce off of each other in an interesting way.
I get the idea between the like having different MCs. It would add a lot of variation, and it does. I just don't think it always comes across well because of how dated some of the rapping is.
Yeah, the rapping tends to be kind of clumsy and clunky in a few places, where on that track 5 Man Army he just sort of like tries to go too far ahead of himself in his flow, where he just sort of sounds like he's dribbling like a bulldog. How's it going on as well? And he trips up over himself. I think the writing and lyrics, the delivery and flows, the production, all just sort of spells out that the group was in an early stage. And I think in albums we'll talk about eventually, they definitely improved on and enhanced these like light elements of a very strong sense of mood and like theme.
There's still good content, like I was saying with the production. The creative choices, it's still there, so you know that just as they improve over time, unless they suddenly go off the rails. Arcade Fire, Justice, Who else? Because you can hear in this album, like, the creative choices improved over time. Stuff like the chops in Unfinished Sympathy on the vocals, which is it's Planetary Citizen. Yeah. That vocal line they're sampling from that, they chop up and vary towards the end of the song.
Oh, you mean the
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And also, what they did to that sample sounds way better than what it sounds like in the.
Really?
Have you heard it? It sounds whiny as fuck.
They've applied some sort of the lo-fi grit to it.
Yeah, well, the reverb helps a lot as well,
Yeah.
just to push that annoying prick back.
As a more finalized point, this album is more palatable when you place it in the context that it was in 1991. Song Lately.
Yeah, so that had
Okay.
different percussion samples in Lately, from more resonant and hard-hitting snares to like compressed snares that are doing fills, with which you can hear way more of the snare, and it sounds more like it's to tape, and it's been pushed hard to tape because there's a bit of noise there.
I think it's just because they used an older sample and sampled directly from record. The sample is I think the alterations between like the drum beats are probably just going back and forth between those two samples.
Yeah, that's possible.
And one of them
Still adds variation.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
nice.
yeah. It could do with it. It is slightly one of the more monotonous tracks on the album, but I do appreciate it for being like the one that's aged the best, just out of how crisp and full the production still is. I think something about the production overall that we feel is lacking in this album is just how like full some of the bass regions tend to be, or rather lack thereof.
Yeah, there is a lot more in the 2012 version. I only listened to it once, and that was by accident.
The 2012 remaster.
Yeah.
Him and the Big Wheel. Suitable ending.
Really nice change up to have from the intro. You do not expect the ambient, and I don't know what is being played, but it's the same sort of stuff that I do in my music, where you just drown in reverb and make the instruments sound like they're screaming and whining, and I love that.
It's like the other side of the group's versatility, where like the first track on the album is, let's say, heads of the coin. It's darker, it's moodier, and it's more punchy. But yeah, you've got the flip side, which is this brighter, slightly more ethereal, generally more positive song, like in each respect. I think maybe the electronic drums don't really complement what's happening that much. They're like playing this pretty steady, fast, like kind of funk groove, albeit sequenced. I guess, I don't know, I didn't think it like fell into the rest of the mix that coherently, but just as an album ender, it's a pretty peaceful note to end on. Maybe we should end this peacefully. Show me.
Wow. That's how we feel.